Good morning, everyone. I'm Ernesto Burden. I'm the publisher of New Hampshire Business Review. Welcome to today's webinar, Commercial Real Estate 2025 and Beyond, Evolving Trends to Watch, sponsored by McLane Middleton. We appreciate that greatly. Today's panelists are John Weaver, Director and Chair of the Real Estate Group at McLane Middleton; Sabrina Beavens, Director, Real Estate Practice Group, McLane Middleton; Caroline Palucha, Associate, Real Estate Practice Group, McLane Middleton; Chris Norwood, President, NAI Norwood Group; Oscar Moreno, Senior Vice President and Director of Commercial Banking at Camden National Bank. Welcome, everyone, and we are going to kick off with Sabrina. So, Sabrina, welcome to you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar sponsored by my law firm, McLane Middleton, and with my colleagues, John Weaver and Caroline Palucha. Navigating, our topic today is 2025 real estate. We're obviously in a complex environment right now. As far as New Hampshire is concerned, our view is New Hampshire remains an appealing state for investors, developers, and tenants. Still, if we take the lens back, there's a lot going on right now in our economy, and it seems like at any day, at any point in time, factors could happen that could quickly turn our business environment on its head. Today, our panelists are here to discuss what they are observing as far as commercial real estate trends and trends in commercial lending. But first, I'm going to turn the program over to my colleague, John Weaver, who's going to talk about a very popular topic today, and that's AI and its impact on commercial real estate. It seems like AI is everywhere, and John's going to tell us how it is impacting commercial real estate today. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, John Weaver.
Sabrina, thanks very much. I am going to share my screen, hopefully successfully, as I'm not only the chair of our of McLane's real estate practice group, I am also the chair of our AI practice group. I've been a commercial real estate attorney for 17 years and an AI attorney for a little over a decade. And there's still nothing more embarrassing than when a technology attorney cannot get the technology to work. So let's hope that I can get my slides up on the screen. There we go. That looks promising. So what I'm going to be talking about for the next 15 minutes or so are the ways in which AI is entering and impacting the real estate market, practices, operations of real estate, et cetera. I'm not going to be saying so much about data centers. Data centers are one of the more popular topics when AI and real estate are discussed. They are becoming increasingly popular. For a number of years, they were isolated in the south and southwest of the country for a variety of economic and logistical reasons. We're seeing more of them appear in the Northeast. We probably, excuse me, I'm battling bronchitis right now. So it's a good example of why webinars can be preferable to in-person events at times. I suspect we'll see more of them entering the New Hampshire market. However, my topic of conversation today is how AI is impacting the real estate market generally in the practice of commercial real estate in New Hampshire. And so I'm really going to be talking about a few overarching issues that AI introduces, both to the management of properties as well as the transactional element of real estate. So first, we'll be looking at facial recognition. Then we'll be talking about data collection at properties, then looking at property videos for brokers and other people involved in transactional matters. We'll be talking about the production of forms and title review. So facial recognition is a type of AI technology, and I'm sure you're familiar with it if you have it on your phone, if you have it on your computer to unlock the phone or the computer. Increasingly, sophisticated property owners and property management companies are starting to incorporate that into their property management practices. Madison Square Garden a year or two ago made some headlines because they were using facial recognition software to identify individuals in crowds at Madison Square Garden events. And if if the individuals were on exclusion lists, those individuals would either be prevented from entering or escorted out. This came to light when a mother was escorting her daughter's brownie troop to see the Rockettes at Madison Square Garden. And the mother works for a law firm that represents litigants against the owners of Madison Square Garden. And because she was part of that law firm, not that she actually represented the litigants in that, but just because she was part of the law firm that represented the litigants, she was on the exclusion list, and she was security found her, escorted her off the property. She had to meet up with the Browning troop later. The New York Attorney General made some noise about investigating this, penalizing the Madison Square Garden ownership group. However, no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no further action, legal action from that, suggesting that the way MSG had set this up was permitted under New York state law. And as we'll see in a little bit, there are a number of situations where this can be useful for property owners, although you do need to take into account certain precautions. So in contrast, this is again another New York example. New York State banned facial recognition software from schools after there was an investigation and found that the risks outweigh the potential benefits. Now, the benefits are security, first and foremost, that if you're recognizing everybody that comes into the property, the only people that should enter the property are ones that are authorized visitors. Another benefit that is a benefit for everybody at the property. Another benefit for the property managers is that facial recognition can end up being pretty valuable data that can then either get incorporated into the operation of the property, or that can be a separate revenue stream for property managers if they're able to put the proper privacy and security measures in place to comply with excuse me, personal privacy laws, both in the jurisdiction and in the type of data. For example, in schools, there's a different set of privacy and security laws governing kids and students' data versus just typical data in say, a commercial property setting. And that kind of segues into what the risks are of setting this up, where all the data that you hold ends up being a potential liability if you're not monetizing that. So we regularly counsel companies that have literally decades worth of data that they've retained either on their physical servers or on their cloud servers. A lot of that data no longer has any purpose for them. It's not data related to active customers. It's a property owner. It might not be data related to any current tenants or potential tenants. But if there is a breach and that data is lost, you could have notification requirements, you could have remediation requirements under state law. And so the risk and benefit needs to be analyzed and weighed against one another when considering whether you want to implement facial recognition software at any property. This is becoming a more popularly used tool nationwide. I don't see it a lot in the New Hampshire market, but I do expect to see it in one extent or another in the not too distant future. This brings us to data collection, and increasingly sophisticated property owners are looking for ways to maximize the data that they collect, analyze, and use from their properties. They might use tools like Placer.ai to gain insights and customer behavior around their properties. They might also set up mobile data collection centers on their properties to gauge when people are entering the property. It's particularly true for retail properties. Both tenants and landlords can cooperate on this. We'll discuss this in a moment. In terms of tracking individual devices as they come in and out of the property, and in and out of stores, particular stores, how long they stay there. All that can be used to target marketing at particular customers, understanding shopper behaviors, and trying to enhance customer engagement and property marketing. And again, depending on the property that you own and that you're managing, this can be more or less applicable. It's particularly useful in retail properties. It doesn't have as many, excuse me, it's not as useful in, say, industrial or commercial properties, or though even with those, if you're a property manager or property owner that has put in place amenities at your property, being able to track how frequently those amenities are used, when they're used, can help you rejigger how those amenities are offered and what amenities are offered at properties going forward. And as I mentioned, landlords and tenants do collaborate on this to lend information among themselves for mutual benefit. And there was an NHL team arena lease from not that long ago that was a great example of this. And I pulled a number of the examples from that lease here, where the tenant, the NHL team, and the arena owner agreed to share data for people coming in and out of the arena. So, so the landlord might be able to track who's coming onto the property generally, and then once they're within the arena and going to specific locations within the arena, the team might be able to track that better. Well, the landlord and the team tenant are sharing that with one another and allowing each entity to use that for various purposes. And that can be used in a retail setting where the landlord tracks who's coming onto the property and what their travel path is within the property. And then they can share that with the tenant stores, who then also have information about how long those individuals are actually in their stores, what they're buying, et cetera. All this can create a very complex, sophisticated, and really data-rich outline and profile for individual travelers and visitors to properties that can make the property more profitable for the landlord as well as for the tenants. And again, to go back to the commercial office example, if a landlord is able to identify what the key amenities are that it can show through data that tenant employees use, they can offer that, they can show that data to subsequent tenants that they're trying to lure in and say, hey, we know what your employees are going to use. Here's the data to back that up. Here's how we and here's how we take advantage of that to give you, our tenant, and your employees the best possible experience here. Again, I don't see this as much in the New Hampshire market. I see it in other markets, but I do expect it to come to the New Hampshire market as this technology becomes more widely spread, and also some of the costs related to it decrease. Excuse me. Now, although there is mutual sharing and approval, the parties, the tenants, and the landlords typically put restrictions on sale and licensing. That's both to ensure maximize the value for those parties. There also could be some concerns jurisdictionally in terms of what those parties can do to sell the data to parties that aren't immediately associated with the property. Collection sharing compliance, again, you want to make sure that whatever is stated in your lease, if you start to develop your lease to include data sharing, data collection provisions, that you're mindful of the New Hampshire privacy law. And then when it comes to ownership and use rights, there could be some dispute between the tenant and the landlord as to who owns that customer data. Is the individual coming to the property because of the tenant, because of the landlord? And then therefore who owns that? Who owns the data that's collected because of that? And you might think that you automatically want ownership of the data, but if you're the party that's designated as having ownership of the data, you might have further regulatory compliance issues and even regulatory exposure from fines and from enforcement measures. So you want to be careful about that as you're considering this. Not mentioned on this slide, although also relevant, are mutual security provisions. If you're collecting data, both at the tenant and the landlord, and you're sharing that with one another, chances are both parties will want to impose data security measures on each party so that there is less of a chance of a breach. And then in the event of a breach, both parties are going to have certain obligations placed upon them. In terms of complying with the state law for breach notification, and who's going to bear the cost, et cetera. Some of that's relevant for cyber liability insurance policies. Some cyber liability insurance providers will not insure claims unless there is proper contractual language that would trigger the cyber liability policy to pay out. So, all this data then becomes really valuable in terms of AI processing and being able to identify tenant behavior, user behavior, individual behavior, in ways that would help property managers and owners maximize the value of their properties. In terms of the transactional practice, conveyancing, selling, et cetera, Chris might be able to comment on this as well. I've seen an explosion of property videos where realtors and owners are using AI tools to make the properties more appealing on LoopNet or on other websites when potential buyers are going to look. So this image I created using ChatGPT. I just asked for images of a standard Class A office building. I picked one of those and then made a very short video with it. So this is not a real picture. This was AI generated. The video, not real, also AI generated. Very short for the purposes of this presentation. But you can take multiple pictures of a real property, put them into an AI video generating software, add music to it, add voice overlay, and it becomes a really appealing tool to sell and market properties. Production of documents. No fancy slide here, unfortunately. But the AI generation tools that are available have some pretty impressive abilities. You can go to ChatGPT and ask for a purchase and sale agreement for a particular piece of real estate. You can give the address, you can give the price, and it will produce a not terrible purchase and sale agreement. You probably are better off using the New Hampshire Brokers Forum at this point if you're looking for an automatically generated document. That obviously has been vetted by New Hampshire brokers. It's based on New Hampshire law, whereas the ChatGPT version of that is not necessarily going to properly reflect New Hampshire practices, et cetera. Similarly, you can try using ChatGPT or Gemini, other generally available generative AI products to produce settlement statements, other closing documents. You just make sure that you vet them carefully. A lot of them aren't very good. I still think that you want to rely on your broker and your real estate counsel for any closing rather than relying solely on generative AI documents. What you might have a better time using these for is getting summaries of documents. Again, though, use these with caution. Unless you have an enterprise level contract with any of these providers, the information you provide to the generative AI application is going to be available to the company that developed that generative AI application. Meaning any information you give it, any personal information, any private information, is no longer private. That goes to that company. So that is a long way of saying that some of these AI applications can be used to produce or summarize documents. You have to use them very carefully, and you want to make sure that that what you've done is carefully vetted by both yourself, by your broker, and if you have counsel, by counsel, because they might not accurately state what the deal is. They might not comply with New Hampshire law, and you might set yourself up for a contested closing or engagement after the fact. And then finally, title review. You can provide if you get your documents from your title from your title company or your lender or your counsel, et cetera, and you want to have a better idea of what's in the title documents yourself, in addition to the counsel that you're receiving from your attorney, from your broker, et cetera. We have had some luck giving PDFs of these documents to generative AI applications to have them summarize them. And since these documents are in the public domain, as long as you're not providing your information on top of that, like there frequently will be a cover sheet to any title report, title abstract that you get that will have your information. I'm more comfortable giving recorded documents to generative AI applications. Again, hallucinations happen. You need to be careful. But if you're looking for another way to review these documents, get a better idea of what might be recorded against a property you're interested in buying or property that you already have, this is not a terrible way to proceed. But again, you want to trust your broker, your real estate counsel, in order to make sure that you're not being misled by generative AI hallucinations or documents that don't reflect New Hampshire law. And with that, I will kick it back to Sabrina.
Thanks, John. Great presentation as always. John does a lot internally for our firm, and I always learn something every time. And I think it's just such an interesting topic that's going to be constantly changing over the next few years. I should have mentioned earlier for our attendees that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have reserved time for questions and answers at the end of the program. So if there is already one, I see, thank you, in the Q&A room. So as the presentation goes forward, if you'd like to submit a question, we have reserved time to answer those at the end of the program. Next, we're going to turn to Caroline Palucha, John Weaver again, and Chris Norwood. And John's already introduced himself, but if Chris and Caroline would like to briefly introduce themselves before you kick off your panel discussion on New Hampshire real estate trends, commercial real estate trends right now. Thank you.
Sure, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Palucha, and I am an associate in our firm's real estate practice group and corporate department. I assist John and Sabrina with some of their commercial clients, their commercial real estate clients, as well as some residential clients. And I also help out in the corporate realm as well. A lot of times the corporate deals involve a real estate aspect, so we're always happy to jump in and help there. And Chris, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sounds great. Thank you. My name is Chris Norwood. Welcome to some of the friends I see in the attendee list. My name is Chris Norwood. I'm the president of NAI Norwood Group. I've been in commercial real estate around 20 plus years. In my volunteer role, I spent a lot of time in the public policy arena, having chaired the New Hampshire Association of Realtors Public Policy Committee for the immediate past 5 years, looking at the intersection of private property rights and kind of the New Hampshire legal world or regulatory world, I should say. So pleased to be with you. And John and Caroline, if I could, can I just piggyback on a couple things that you said during that AI presentation, John?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned Placer AI, and I would just ask that anyone who is on the Zoom call, I don't know if there's a free version of Placer AI, but we had subscribed to that service, at least gotten a few demos a couple times last year. It is absolutely amazing. We were able to give an address that happened to be, in this case, it was a shopping plaza, and we wanted to know where the folks that visited there are coming from. And so what it does, just think of your phone. You download Candy Crush, you download a mapping software, you download almost anything on your phone, and it says, you know, can I do this, this, and this? Most people just accept it. Now that phone is tracking you. And so we were able to say, I want to know if the people going to this shopping plaza, are they coming from their office? Are they coming from their home? How much time did they spend in this shopping plaza? Did they get coffee before they came to the shopping plaza or after? And how much did they spend? And then we can extrapolate that on a sales per square foot basis. So John, when you say it's coming to New Hampshire, on the retail side, I believe it already is here. The data at least is here. Whether or not the landlords and the tenants are using it to the power it has, it is phenomenal.
Yeah, no, and I apologize. I sometimes take for granted the amount that my audiences know. So I'm glad that you revisited that because I think that's a very practical example of what I was talking about. My and I could be wrong, but my experience with landlords and tenants in New Hampshire is that they are not taking as much advantage of the available resources in this area as they could be. And Chris, I think you're absolutely right that for a lot of the properties, for probably most of the properties in New Hampshire, Placer AI and similar services has that data available and it can be available to landlords and to tenants. They're simply just not taking advantage of it. And they're also not baking it into the agreements around that property in a way that would be helpful to both parties.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that one of the things that where you have it's the sophistication of the national landlords and the
Yeah.
national tenants where they're using that data. A couple other quick points. You mentioned that marketing and the marketing video. Some folks may not be aware of this, but the National Association of Realtors, of which I'm a member, then there's around 7,000 realtors, residential and commercial, in the state of New Hampshire, and about 1 million realtors nationwide. There is a code of ethics that we subscribe to. And one of those pieces of the code of ethics is getting stressed with AI. And that piece is the direct or exaggeration of a property dynamic. And so if I were to have created an AI video, much in the same way John did, there's a question as to whether or not, unless properly disclosed, was that image enhanced? Was I doing virtual staging? Was I saying, I'm the best commercial broker in the planet and this is the best property in the world? Is that direct, deliberate misrepresentation? So there's an ethical question there. Finally, I just want to comment on the forms, and this goes for the purchase and sales agreement and the LOI. I must say, John, until you mentioned purchase and sales agreement, it never would have occurred to me to use a non-lawyer or non-commercial board of realtors P&S, just because you're always going to step in it. But I just did a quick chat GPT P&S while you were giving your comments, and it is alarming how many faults are in there just on a quick cursory look. For the benefit of the group, I served on the forms task force for the commercial board. And as John was saying, it's so hard to write a purchase and sales agreement to begin with, let alone one that is hallucinating gaps of what is the standard by which we give up a deposit? Is it a known defect, a previously undisclosed defect? That's just one example that these AI PNSs don't speak to.
Yeah, and if I didn't hit this point hard enough during my presentation, I apologize. But it to an untrained eye, it will look a lot better than it is. And so I do not recommend that you use those forms. I understand that they're appealing, and Chris, to your point, we're seeing them where we know we're getting documents. The other side doesn't necessarily admit it, but we know we're getting a document that has been either revised or drafted via AI. And so I'm speaking to it because I know it's happening. But I would not rely on those forms. To Chris's point, you really want that to be reviewed by somebody that is well practiced in this area, a broker, a real estate attorney, somebody that really knows the practice and understands, like Chris said, what the traps for the unwary are, and also just what the standard practice is in New Hampshire. Because if you're getting a P&S that's drafted or a settlement statement that's drafted by a generative AI application, it's not going to know, all right, how is the transfer tax split? When are real estate taxes paid? And how does that get properly reflected both in the settlement statement and in the purchase and sale agreement? There are things like that that are nuanced, and you only know if you practice in the state and if you're doing transactions in the state.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. I thought those were great comments, John, and I just wanted to give a couple real world applications. So Caroline and John, what other questions do we have?
Yes, to start us off, you've mentioned to us that the office market is softening, but that it isn't dead. What would you say is causing this shift in New Hampshire? How are landlords and tenants responding? And what challenges are you seeing?
So I think that the catchphrase that you're hearing is return to office or back to office, RTO, sometimes the abbreviation. And I would argue in New Hampshire, we shouldn't think of it as a return to office challenge. It's a commuting challenge. And what I mean by that, a quick story. I was talking the other day with a friend who was unfortunately laid off, and he was looking for employment. And I asked him, because he had been remote for years. I said, "Oh, do you want to find something full remote?" He said, "Actually, I'd like to go back to the office, but if I'm asked to commute to Boston, maybe not, maybe one day a week. But if I can go to like Burlington North, or certainly if there's anything in New Hampshire, I would be in the office every day." And so I think as landlords and tenants, business owners and employees, we need to think about what are the hours that we're taking out of our day to physically get into the office. And again, I say it's a commuting challenge. If you're being asked to commute 20 minutes, or you're asking your employees to commute 20 minutes into an office building where there's easy parking and there's amenities in the area, whether it's shopping or lunch, I think that that is a reasonable request versus taking 10 hours out of our week or more to go to Boston and back. So just some thoughts for people. And again, I'm speaking broadly. There are certain industries, the tech industry, where certainly virtual remote work is much more common. But I think in New Hampshire, we should think about it in terms of commuting back to the office, not necessarily physically being there.
Thank you, Chris. I think the next question we had was kind of involving AI again. So I don't know if, John, you want to take that one?
Yeah, maybe Chris, you just want to kind of briefly comment on LOIs. We were talking about purchase and sale agreements before. What do you see in terms of AI generated LOIs? You mentioned that that's actually what you're seeing, not necessarily purchase and sale agreements so much. And do you think that AI is having a meaningful impact right now, or playing a meaningful role in the commercial real estate market?
Yeah, where we're seeing more of the AI generated LOIs is in the mergers and acquisitions space. So we have a mergers and acquisitions team as part of our firm that divests of both real estate and ongoing business activities for clients. And we're seeing a lot of junior buyers who, and I don't want to be too disparaging on them, because they did educate themselves and took courses and so forth, but they feel that they can generate an LOI that is a binding LOI that takes a business off the market, that is generated by AI and has the previous loopholes that we talked about. So just be leery of any sort of generated AI form. And as to your point from earlier, John, for some reason, they're very easy to detect. I think we've all seen generated AI content at this point, and they're becoming easier to detect.
They're particularly easy when you know what the relative either sophistication or writing style of the other party is. And if it becomes dramatically different, and also there's, like you said, there's a tone and a style, that's another telltale sign.
All right, so the next question we have is, with interest rates staying higher for longer, it seems that investors are having to rethink how they approach deals. So I'm wondering, what impacts are you seeing on passive investors versus those investors who are also planning to use the space?
Yeah, so real briefly, and I'd love to hear Oscar's comments on this. Chairman Powell lowering the Fed interest rate a quarter did not do much to the market overall. I think that that pricing was already kind of built into interest rates, and curious of Oscar's thoughts about what will take place moving forward. Caroline, specifically to the investor versus user market, the investor market, I will say the last 5 years or so, with a lot of the capital that was in the market and the rapid increase in the rental rates, particularly on the apartment and multifamily side, it was able to cover up a lot of mistakes. And I think a lot of people were making a lot of appreciation of their value, but that's harder to do. Deals are harder to do, come by these days. But on the user side, I'm not saying the interest rates don't matter, but there's strategic reasons they're expanding their warehouse or consolidating their supply chain, that they kind of go beyond just whatever the interest rate is when they negotiate with Oscar.
Yeah, I don't know,
Oscar,
Oscar,
I saw
if you want
you.
to jump in.
Yeah,
Oh.
I was gonna say I saw you appear.
Sure. Yeah, no, great question. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for allowing me to present. From the lender's perspective, You're absolutely right, Chris. When rates changed, we didn't really see a change at all. They had already been baked in. And in some instances, we've actually seen indicative rates go up. And really what's happening is the short-term rates are decreasing, longer-term or mid-term rates are flat or increasing. So overall, rates haven't really changed. The challenges that we're seeing from a lender's perspective is construction costs remain high, so building new is tough. A lot of the maturities that are coming up were penciled to a debt service that worked at 2, 3, 4, 5%, not necessarily 6. And also from a investor's approach, we're acutely interested in how the tenants may be doing, whether or not they may be renewing their leases, and what does lease rollover look like from a lender's perspective when we're committing to 3, 5, 7, or 10-year commitments.
Thank you for that.
Chris, I wanted to ask a little bit about federal leases. What types of changes have you seen in GSA leases, and how frequently does that occur? Like, how frequently do trends change like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for those folks who don't know, GSA, really any sort of federal government lease, and there's a rather long bidding process. These RFPs are, it's like, take about 4 or 5 chapters of the Bible, right? And you got to respond to every single page. And so the last GSA lease that I was working on a team about to respond to was right in the thick of Doge. And, you had all the chainsaw comments and so forth. And essentially, the question came from the landlord to us as the brokerage team is, how much effort should we be expending on this? And when I say effort, John, Caroline, you've probably both been part of this. It's like, you need an architect, you need the property manager, you need the broker and the lawyer just to respond to the RFP. I haven't even gotten to securing the transaction. This is all risk capital. So I think, John, if there's a lesson to be learned about what's going on with GSA leases in the federal government right now, is the unease and the conversations taking place in Washington have put landlords kind of on their back feet to say, do we want to invest this risk capital? How real are these potential new lease acquisitions by our federal government?
Chris, you and I were talking a little bit before the presentation about SBA loans and the shutdown. How has the shutdown that's still ongoing impacted SBA loans? And this might be one that Oscar wants to chime in on as well.
Yeah, so Oscar, if you could chime in here as well, and while he's unmuting, I'll just say from my perspective, I can't remember the last time I went on a vacation and I completely shut down from email. But if I'm an SBA underwriter and I shut down on email for the last 3 weeks, and that's just now, right? Who knows how long this thing is going to go? When I get back to my computer after a 3-week vacation, how long is it going to get me to catch up on all those SBA loans? Oscar, what's going on in your world?
You're spot on. It's unfortunate for borrowers where they're dependent on a traditional SBA guarantee, whether it's 504 or 7A. We're on hold, and we can't tell them when that approval is going to come through or when we as a bank are going to be able to conclude the closing. And to your point, once the federal shutdown has completed, it's going to take them weeks, if not months, to come back and solve for all of the requests that are out there. I think my team currently is fielding several conversations when we're just wondering whether or not the closing is going to happen this year or is going to go into next year. And how does that jeopardize their deposits if they're buying something? So those are some serious questions that we frankly don't have any answers to.
And thank you for that. And I think, Chris, this will be our last question for you before we close out this portion of our webinar. I was just wondering, given everything we've discussed, what do you think separates a player who's navigating this market successfully versus those who seem to be struggling?
I'll say that this may not sound that grandiose, but I think what's the Belichick phrase? Do your job,
Yeah.
right? If you can, if you spend your time in what you're good at, if you're really good in office or you're really good in retail investment or ground up development, really lean into that. There are obviously macro trends that you want to be aware of, but there's still uncertainty in the market. Oscar and I have touched upon a couple of the things that bring uncertainty. But listen, there's a lot of great opportunity. We haven't touched upon a lot of the positive things coming out of the One Big Beautiful Bill and what that may do to commercial real estate. Maybe we'll have some time to touch upon that. But in New Hampshire, we never had that overbuilding. So I don't think that we're looking at the downward trends that perhaps the office market in, say, downtown Boston is facing. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think, again, do your job, stay in your lane. Don't try and say, oh, this is the financial crisis or this is COVID and I'm going to reinvent myself. No, 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 no. We're just getting a little bit of headwinds, but this too shall pass.
Thank you, Chris. That's great advice. Keep your blinders on, stay focused on the fundamentals, even when things are uncertain. So now I think I'll quickly pass it over to Sabrina to introduce our next section.
Thanks, Caroline and John and Chris. I think we'll be coming back to Chris for that question on One Big Beautiful Bill. You've piqued my interest at the Q&A section. Now we're going to introduce Oscar Moreno. He's done some guest appearance in this current panel, but I don't want to slight him on the opportunity to introduce himself and with his conversation with Caroline again on more lender side observations as we're ending 2025, going into 2026.
Sure. Thank you, Sabrina. It's been an interesting year for sure. It feels like we're very busy, but many times not getting to the finish line. I think generally speaking, I'm very happy to be in New Hampshire. Historically, New England has always performed well, and New Hampshire has a lot to be proud of. We're strategically located. We have a business-friendly environment from a tax perspective as well as growth. There's a lot of individuals that are moving to New Hampshire for its lifestyle, whether it's skiing or summer boating or swimming or any of the many things that people do in New Hampshire. But also we're experiencing a tremendous growth in defense, manufacturing, employment in and around New Hampshire with life sciences. So there's a lot of things that are moving in the right direction, but as Chris alluded to earlier, we don't have an abundance of building. And the challenges that we're seeing from a lender's perspective is the construction costs and the high interest rates are preventing, for example, affordable housing, which people that are working in the state need to be able to live in. We're also seeing some economic downturns in the hospitality side from foreign travel. But generally speaking, there is a lot of upside to New Hampshire, but it's just a matter of time.
Thank you, Oscar. And I think that went a bit into the first question that I had for you, which was kind of your perspective on the commercial real estate market in New Hampshire today and how those pressures are affecting the different property sectors. I think yesterday you and I had a quick discussion on kind of luxury apartments that are being developed in the area. And you mentioned that you're seeing kind of an influx of rental fraud. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit more to that and how that's affecting the lender's perspective.
Sure. As we travel to see our customers, whether it's North Country, Lakes region, or Southern New Hampshire, many of our customers who are business owners are struggling with the commuting time that was spoken to earlier with regards to folks that need to work and live in a community. So the travel time to work is now over an hour, generally speaking. And there is construction going on, but the construction is generally luxury. And the reason it needs to be luxury is the ability to repay the debt. So the construction cost is high. Earlier, Chris was talking about the ability to, or the lead time to be able to get a project off the ground, being able to bring in architects, engineers, planning, approvals. So all of that takes time, which requires capital. once the project is up, they're going to be looking for a return, and that return is usually going to come in from higher priced condominiums or apartments, which is luxury. So those luxury units are well over $2,000, primarily speaking. So in New Hampshire, that's sort of the issue that we're seeing, and we're not seeing enough affordable housing or workforce housing. The comment about the fraud is over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of news and conversations around the tricolor issues within the credit side, and then also experiencing markets where there are application frauds with regards to whether an individual is employed or their income level, or perhaps a perceived ability to repay those higher costs in order to find living. And over several months, what those unit owners are finding is that they don't have the ability to collect.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the next question, when we've talked a lot about AI today, but it's a topic that I think we're all interested in. We're all loving this topic. So I was just wondering your perspective on AI's impact, and if that's affected your lending practices, or if you see it potentially doing so down the line.
Sure, good question. We haven't really seen much of an impact from a lender's perspective on our loans, whether it's industrial, office, residential, or generally speaking, any of our C&I portfolio. I think where we're sort of just keen on is what does that mean for job growth? What does it mean for employment? And that unemployment will then directly correlate to occupancy, whether it's office or apartments, as well as residential products. So I think generally, we have seen a little bit of an uptick in New Hampshire for unemployment. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick in vacancy for office, although it's not as comparable to Boston, but we are seeing an uptick in that. So if AI comes in from a positive perspective and helps folks like you and I be more efficient with our time, then it's going to be great. But if it is from a perspective that it could impact employment, then those factors would impact further our vacancies.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And so I think the next question we had during our discussion yesterday, as we were preparing for the webinar today, you also mentioned that you're seeing some loan losses due to the private credit model. Could you explain for our audience what that is, how it impacts you, and if there are any other potentially emerging issues that we should be aware of?
Sure. From our perspective, we haven't necessarily seen that, but in following the news, there are a lot of stresses out there, and those stress testing in portfolios is happening real time. Over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of news with regards to private lenders and some of the cracks that they're seeing. Private lenders have a different accountability in terms of due diligence than a traditional lender, whether it's a regional or a large bank. So the level of due diligence that is being done on the private lending side differs than something that would happen as, for example, at Camden National Bank. And due to that level of due diligence, there are starting to be some cracks out there that is sometimes coming down into the banking level, whether it's an institutional investor that has leveraged a portfolio of apartments or office or mixed use properties and taken those funds and lending it back into the market, or whether it's a company that has that as a business model, obtains traditional lending financing, and then relends that money out from a private sector perspective. So there are larger banks that have come out and identified some large write-downs that are out there. So those are certainly things that we're acutely following.
Thank you. And I think our last question before we turn it over to some questions for the audience. Earlier, Chris commented on the big, beautiful bill. And so I'm wondering if we can maybe get your take and maybe invite Chris back to comment on that as well.
Sure. A very recent success story from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is we're very fortunate in this area to have a vibrant manufacturing vertical. So one of our customers in the area reaped some significant benefits due to the R&D credits that are coming back. So from a manufacturing perspective, some of those R&D credits have been phased out many years ago, and now those are reincorporated in, and those are significant add-backs that from a credit facility perspective, we can account for. So this individual or this company was able to fully benefit from some add-backs that we had seen back in 2015, 2016 that were phased out. So I do think that there's some significant lifts that we're going to see from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
And Chris, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so one of the things that came out in the 2017 Trump tax bill were the creation of the opportunity zones. And while there are a number of them in the state, I think there's one in Raymond, the Mill Yard, parts of Durham, I believe. They, for the most part, I've really not seen an opportunity zone deal get done. I know there were a lot of funds chasing them. But we'll see if they continue to remain. Basically, the opportunity zones, by the way, were a way to defer, in some case, eliminate taxes if you invested so much capital into that region. The One Big Beautiful Bill is looking to expand those opportunity zones, giving more geography in each state that would be subject to these tax deferments. And then the other piece, going back to Oscar's point on the manufacturing side, there's a big carrot out there for manufacturers being able to take bonus or accelerated depreciation for manufacturing spaces. And I should comment with both of these things that this is the bill has been passed, but a lot of the IRS regulatory rules have not been drafted. So there is some speculation. Obviously, this is recorded, right? So everyone talk to their CPA, talk to your tax lawyer. But the anticipation is that a manufacturer would be able to actually take the part of the property that is 39-year life, like your roof and your slab, and actually expense those portions of the building that are part of your manufacturing. So if you are a manufacturer acquiring a new asset that is a new building to you, it can't be your existing building and you're expanding your production, then you can expense some of these components of your building, not the office space, not the loading. But again, it remains to be seen once these rules are written.
Some more certainty in our future, it seems. So, but excellent. Thank you both for commenting on that. I'll pass it back over to Sabrina.
All right, I'm just going to wrap up here and thank everyone, especially our panelists, Chris and Oscar, for agreeing to join. John, Caroline, and I today, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. For our audience, I'm going to assume you can, our contact information may be available in the webinar registration. If not, I think I've learned from John that you can ask AI to locate us and it will likely track us down, including wherever we're picking up our cup of coffee. So I think we're all findable, but we would welcome anyone who would like to continue conversations offline after this call. I think any one of us would welcome a call. And with that, Ernesto, I see at least one question in our Q&A room, and I will turn the remainder of the program over to you.
Thank you. And thank you all. Great conversation. It was fascinating. We do have a question in the Q&A. I have a couple, if we have time, we may not get to all of them, but let's start with the audience question. And audience, if you have any more, please feel free to weigh in now in this last 4 minutes of the webinar. The question was, what if a landlord's facial recognition has deemed a person ineligible to enter a property, but a legal tenant in the property has invited that person to the property? In the MSG example, the Dolans own the building and the events, sports, concert shows, etc. What if the two entities are not the same? And I think that's probably for you, John.
Yeah, I can take that one. The short answer is there might be a dispute between the tenant and the landlord. The longer answer is that this is the type of thing that if there's going to be facial recognition software used at a property and there's an agreement between the tenant and the landlord, this should be spelled out in the lease. Chances are the tenant is going to insist that, hey, look, if we have a potential customer coming to our store, we have a vested interest in getting that tenant or getting that individual to our store, to our office, et cetera. And the landlord is going to insist, well, but I ultimately own the property and therefore I retain the right to keep people out if I so choose, and I have a good reason for that. And ultimately, if it's properly addressed in the lease, that's what's going to settle it. Absent that language, then there's a potential dispute. If it's just one person, my guess is that this is going to be settled relatively quietly and quickly between the tenant and landlord, and there'll be some sort of amendment or longer term agreement governing what happens going forward. But ideally, the lease establishes what the decision making process and that is going to be, who has the right to reject people, why, et cetera.
Great. Thanks, John. One last question in the time that we have left. You had spoken, Chris, about the return to office and that potential impact and how on the market overall. I'm wondering, as people are coming back in different ways, is the type of space that they're looking for different than it used to be? Even in terms of configuration, in terms of when you have people who might be sharing hybrid spaces, how has that changed since maybe the return after the pandemic?
Great question. I think for smaller office tenancies, if you're talking anywhere under 5,000 square feet, the answer is not much. It's pretty much the same. You got your all small demised offices. When you start getting above 5,000 square feet, and now you're talking about maybe having some hotel or hot desking where, I may have my desk for the day, but I have to bring in the picture of my wife and kids, right? Because I got to take it with me on the way out the door. I will say one of the things that I saw a lot of folks try to do, but I don't think it's really successful. Those Superman Zoom phone booths. I don't know if anyone's seen those. Google them if you haven't seen them, but it's a pod that sits in your community space and there's a little window on it and you sit in it and it's soundproof. So if you need to have a private conversation, you can get in one of those and you're guaranteed some peace and quiet. I find that they're kind of like, when you buy a Peloton and it just ends up being like a coat rack. You say, in January you're going to get fit, but then you never really use it. So I think just there are some more collaborative spaces, more smaller conference areas, but those pods just never really caught on.
Interesting. It seems like it sort of might provoke some amusement for the rest of the staff watching you climb into the pod.
You can do finger
Anyway, well,
puppets or something.
on that note, we're at the hour. So I want to thank you all, John, Sabrina, Caroline, Oscar, Chris. What a pleasure to have you here. And thank you to our attendees on behalf of New Hampshire Business Review. I will say also thank you to McLane Middleton for sponsoring today's webinar. A recording of this will be available probably by tomorrow on the website, and we'll send an email out to everybody who registered. So once again, thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of the day.